Welcome back to another installment of the Capital Conversation. Today we're happy to have Riley David joining us again, and we'll be talking about the Nevada debate and the latest in the Democratic primary.
Yeah, so speaking of Nevada, we got some new polling out of there today. Right now, Sanders is in the commanding lead with 38%. Buttigieg is in second with 14%. Steyer follows up with third at 11%. Biden's also at 11%. And then Warren is at 9%, and Klobuchar is last with 5% right now.
The bit about Biden falling down in Nevada is actually quite interesting because it's been assumed for a pretty long time before we started getting actual results back and delegates being assigned that Joe Biden would win in Nevada, and that since it has a large portion of Hispanics, that Joe Biden would have some success there that he hasn't seen in these other early states like Iowa and New Hampshire. But the fact that the polling is now showing him in third, where he's been for
And not
quite some
viable.
time.
That's
Right.
the other key distinction, right? The only two candidates were viable from that poll.
Right.
Well, Sanders, is more than doubled up. He has 38% and Buttigieg has 14%, but nonetheless.
So Buttigieg is at 14.
Yeah.
So that's
Bernie's the only viable candidate.
candidate.
Bernie-
15%, James.
Yeah,
is
Bernie's
viable.
got it wrapped up.
A lock on it. So do you know how the rules of that work?
He gets all the delegates.
He gets all the
He
delegates.
gets all the delegates if no one else reaches above 15%.
The system's so botched. He comes in with, 20-something% of the vote, and because there's so many other candidates, he splits it and wins the entire state? That's goofy.
I think a 15% bar is a pretty low bar to set, though. We had, 5 viable candidates out of New Hampshire?
Correct. The 15% is fairly low, but the fact that there's so many candidates in the field really dilutes the process.
Right, it speaks to the cluster and the fact that a couple of these candidates need to drop out. Like the fact that Warren is polling at 9%, and from what I've seen in the next couple of states leading up to Super Tuesday, she doesn't really have a path to viability in any of them.
Well, I guess her response to that would be, I did so well in the campaign last night. I raised $1 million bucks during the debate.
But this poll, was conducted primarily after the debate, and she still is polling at 9%. So at some point, the dream is dead.
Well, maybe she was at 0, and then
we know
debate
she,
9%.
we know she wasn't at 0.
But you can also argue that Elizabeth Warren is no longer running for president, and she's in fact running for vice president, which I think is a very viable argument.
Right, that's fair. But at the same time, she's been doing this now for almost 4 years. She's been running for president for nearly 4 years.
True.
She's been angling herself since, I would argue 2012, for this eventual run for president. And to me, I think most of her actions are, she doesn't want to give it up. It's the same thing with Hillary Clinton. She's set her life up to this point
And
for
she's
this
not willing to
presidency.
let the dream die.
Right, exactly. And it's not paying out. And, which of the candidates that actually has a pathway to winning the nomination picks Elizabeth Warren as their vice president?
So that's an interesting topic to talk about different candidates, vice presidents. We've got Bernie, who I think everybody's assuming is the front runner right now, for those who aren't holding out hope for Joe Biden. And Bernie's vice president is contentious because him and Elizabeth Warren are actually fairly close personal friends, and many people are speculating that Bernie Sanders would want to either choose a minority or a woman as his vice president in order to balance the ticket on the Democratic side.
For whatever reason, I just don't see him picking Warren as his vice president.
I can see that. I think there's some argument to the DNC wanting to try and balance his more extreme policies with a more moderate vice president.
There's not a chance he picks a moderate.
He's very ideologically pure in that way.
I think that you bring up a good point, because I think that is the most unpredictable thing, is if Bernie eventually goes on to win the nomination, which if you look at 538's model, it basically is saying that it will either be Bernie that wins enough delegates to win the nomination, or it will be that no one has a majority.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to prepare for that possibility, and if that's the case, I really have no idea who he's going to pick, because he doesn't have a lot of close allies that are high-ranking Democratic Party members.
Mm-hmm.
Typically you would look at who are the highest-ranking House members, who are the highest-ranking Senate members, and look at them as potential vice presidential nominees. But in the way that Congress has turned, those high-ranking House and Senate members have become so valuable that it's hard to take them away from their job to go and run for vice president. I don't think we would see Romney-Ryan ticket in today's politics.
No,
I don't think you could take the Speaker of the House away from the speakership and have him run for vice president. That's such an unimportant job.
Right, and it's just so poo-pooed in American politics today. But for Bernie, it's going to be incredibly important. I think, even if you don't believe the rumors that his health is poor and that he's hanging on by a thread, even if you think his health is decent, he's a fairly old guy. And
Right.
there's a
I mean,
good-
I don't think he'll die in the next 8 years, but we could have a Reagan situation on our hands.
Mhm.
Well, and going back to the vice president thing, if you look at the field, he doesn't really have allies in Congress, but there's no way Bloomberg's, he wouldn't pick Bloomberg, but
No.
Bloomberg's not even an option. Steyer's not even an option. There's no way Joe would go back to being a vice president.
No.
I mean, when you look at the field, the only people he could possibly pick that might even accept it are Buttigieg, maybe Klobuchar, maybe Warren.
And I can't see
But
him
he would
picking
never pick Buttigieg or Klobuchar, and
which
I mean,
leaves you with Warren.
Yeah, so,
I may have a hard time seeing.
the more I think about it, the more I'm coming to the conclusion that it could be Warren. I guess Kamala Harris. I
Plus,
guess.
that-
here's
she's the
the
one that
other
always
thing
comes
is
up.
that if you're Warren, do you accept the vice presidency?
I think you have to, right? I mean, it depends on the conversation.
Well-
I think if Bernie comes to you as a friend and says, "Listen, Elizabeth, I need you to run," I think she does it. I think if he asks a favor for her, then she's going to fulfill her favor and she'll help him out. And I think she would be willing to do that because, I mean, if Bernie dies in office, she's president, which is what she wants.
I think that's a possible. I mean, the dude had a heart attack a
Yeah.
month ago.
Well, but here's the thing: is I could see her kind of being a realist, and you have to recognize sort of her trajectory in terms of how she's campaigned. Is she is starting to drop that whole Medicare for all and crusade against billionaires. I mean, not entirely. She still is very progressive, but she's moving more towards the Buttigieg's and Biden's of the party. She's starting to recognize the electability of Sanders, and she could, in her head, say I'm just going to angle myself to try again in 2024 when the field is hopefully smaller and hope he loses.
Do you think she has an opportunity? I think if she doesn't get it now, she's dead. I don't think we will have a field that is so weak ever again in Democratic
Well, what
politics.
if she's the vice president for the next 4 years?
Right, well, that's her
and
only in.
It's looking increasingly likely Trump is going to win re-election regardless of who the Democratic nominee is. If you look at his approval rating, and, if you look at polls in swing states, if you look at the economy. So, I mean, I guess if you're asking whether Warren has a chance or not in 2024, we have to look at, if Trump were to win re-election, who do you see as being the front runner for the Democratic nomination?
I mean,
I
it's
think
not
it's the
gonna
same
be,
people. I mean, everybody in
gotta
the
be the
Democratic
same
Party
field.
that has any clout is running.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the guys Julian Castro and Beto O'Rourke, but I don't think
So they're going to make more noise this time around after Beto sat on his butt for 4 years and not even held elected office?
I mean, I don't know. I could see him popping up again every election for the next 20 years. I mean, he just seems like that kind of guy. But, I mean, again, we keep touching on this, but the vice presidency, I think if Warren accepts the vice presidency, she opens herself up for a run in 2024, and she can still broadcast it as a victory. I'm the first woman to be the vice president. I'm this, I'm that, and she's always going to be in the. She's going to have the cameras on her for the next 4 years.
she'll be in the conversation, I think is what you,
Yeah,
no
she
matter
keeps herself
what
relevant.
happens, if Bernie, if let's say he loses in 2024, or even if he wins 2024, wins 2020, wins 2024, and Warren's the vice president, everybody's looking for her to be the front runner in 2028. I think, it's kind of how we've seen Joe Biden have this opportunity to get the
Well,
spotlight
we're
on
talking
him.
about Bernie's not young and has health concerns and all that. In 8 years, is Warren up for then turning around and being president? After
Well, how
being
old
vice
is
president for
she?
8
She's what,
years?
70 something?
Yeah, exactly.
She's fairly vivacious though,
But we're going to elect a president that's over 80? I mean, come on.
probably gonna.
In the Democratic Party?
I think it's very possible that we see somebody older get elected. I mean, the age in the United States is skewing older as a tendency. We have an aging population. I don't think people are as turned off by it, and I don't think
But
it's
they
going
want
to
to
be an
elect
issue.
a president that they can see electing to 2 terms. And she would be close to 90, if not 90. I mean, I'm not exactly
Mhm.
I'm not exactly sure how old she is. I know she's in her 70s. If she's 74, then that makes her 90.
But do you really think? I mean, sure, maybe the Democratic Party as a whole, the actual DNC, opposes
I don't
her
think
for that
somebody's
reason.
capable of being president at 90 years old.
I agree, but I mean, perhaps we shouldn't make the opponent's age and inexperience an issue here.
I guess.
I mean,
that's
maybe
true.
not 90, but
But to me, the only thing that changes anything in the 2024 field is if you have one of these relatively green candidates that's not very experienced in Democratic politics and something like that, that in this time when they don't get the nomination, I'm really looking at Buttigieg here,
Yeah.
who goes and wins statewide office, whether he goes for the governorship, I don't think he has a prayer in Indiana
No.
with any
No,
statewide
probably
office,
not.
which is the problem. So he would have to move. but I mean, his future in politics is he's not going to get this nomination, but he made some noise. He made himself like very clearly someone that should be a part of the future of the Democratic Party.
Absolutely.
A very seasoned politician, and you know, I think that they should be looking for him to find office somewhere. Maybe it's a congressional district.
And
That's something he could do in Indiana, and you know, works as a congressman 2 terms through 4 years, and starts to develop some name recognition that way, and then he's not getting killed, where he's just like, oh,
right,
you're
or
a mayor
you're inexperienced.
of a small city. Like, at least Bloomberg can say, like, I'm the mayor of New York City. That's like being a governor of like half the states in this country, if not more. But
Right.
Buttigieg is, you know, not a very economically large, not a very population-wise large district, and you know, he was a lackluster mayor there.
Right,
So
if
there's
you're
not a
trying
lot
to-
for him to talk about
Well,
on
I
his
mean,
record.
but
And
people
when you hear-
remember Bloomberg for what he did after 9/11. I mean, helping the city recover from that. Giuliani was there in November, but when Bloomberg came in January, he took a lot of steps there to like ease people in the
Right,
city.
that's my
and-
point, is that Buttigieg doesn't have any of those things to talk about. And when he's on the debate stage, like, he does great on the debate stage, but when he's on the debate stage with Biden, and he's on the debate stage with Sanders, and he's on the debate stage with Bloomberg, and they're all talking about these actual things that they have done in their careers that proves that when they go to the White House, they can actually do the things that they say they're going to do. Whether or not you believe that or not, that's what they're saying to the voters.
Right.
And Biden can talk about so many things on his record. I mean, he has a lot of negative things in his record too.
But he has a lot of experience.
So many, like, you know, there's nothing that Buttigieg can come back with when Biden says, I'm the only one on the stage that, you know, passed healthcare legislation.
I think a lot of people are looking at the like Buttigieg situation right now and wishing that he was Senator Pete or Representative Pete and not Mayor Pete, just because it would give him so much more of an ability to like stand up to Joe Biden and really. I mean, I think he's positioned himself as the front runner moderate, unless you think that Bloomberg is pulling
so what
into that
happens
position.
if Bloomberg, I mean, he had a bad debate, but he's not on the ballot for another 2 weeks. What happens if he dumps another $200 million into this ad campaign
He should.
and takes the lead and wins the nomination? I mean, is Pete somebody he could pick for vice president, or
No.
are you going to get the same situation like?
You can't pick Pete for vice president if you're Bloomberg. I do think that there's like Bloomberg's whole appeal is that moderate people will vote for him, and that people who maybe typically vote Republican but aren't super infatuated with Trump can come over to his side of the aisle. I think you lose a lot of that electability argument, a lot of that moderate reach out argument, if you have a gay guy as your vice president.
Well,
I
I wouldn't even go that far. I think that, you know, what Bloomberg needs in a vice president is the opposite of what Pete brings to the table. And in terms of like the bases that he can cater to. Like, he's got a lot of people in the Democratic Party that are going to hate him because of the fact that he's a rich, old white guy. So it's the same argument that Biden has, except you add the billionaire status on top of that. So it's like Trump on the other end, like, you know, he is not anything like the embodiment of what, you know, the Christian right is looking for in a candidate. So what the Republicans do, they went and got Mike Pence to be his running mate to get that group of the party. So Bloomberg needs to pick somebody that's going to cater to that. Like, we want a minority, we want a woman, we want someone who's not a billionaire.
You don't
So-
think Pete being gay? I mean, you don't think that sort of
I
scratches
think he needs
that
to
itch
pick
for a
a
lot of
female,
people?
and I think ideally she would be African American.
I think Kamala
But
Harris.
I
This
don't-
is why Kamala Harris
there's no
comes
connection.
up in this.
I mean, ideologically Pete fits, so it's not
Right.
a stupid thing to suggest. And see, I think Kamala Harris checks all the boxes, but I don't think there's an ideological fit there.
Well, do you think she'd want to be vice president? I mean, she's already a senator. She's not
I
young,
think she would
but
take.
she's
I think she
relatively
would
young.
take the. I think she would take. the
I would
job.
think she would. I think she'd take it for the same reasons Warren would take it. I think she has ambition to be president, and I think if she becomes vice president, she has the cameras on her for 4 years, can say what she wants, and then by the time it runs out, by the time, like if the Democratic candidate were to win a second term, she's going to be the front runner in
Yeah.
2028.
I
Whoever
see
the vice
Bloomberg
president
picking
is.
her as Attorney General, but I don't see her him picking her as a vice president.
Her policy issues are also pretty muddled for like what she said on the campaign trail, because I think that she was trying to adapt to the field and kind of the way the wind was blowing at any given instant. So it's hard to pin her down as to what she was really, her message was.
Yeah, that's very fair.
Mhm.
But, you know, it is funny that, like, you know, the Democratic Party prides themselves on being the party of diversity and the party of, like,
The
you know,
working man.
minorities and all that. Well, not even getting into that, but I just think it's ironic that, you know, all that is said, but then in the meantime, like, we're having this conversation about vice presidents, and we can only come up with one African-American woman that has stature in the party that could be potential
Right.
for a lot. And I think he'll do a lot better on the debate stage once the field thins.
Yeah.
Like, he has the money to stay in the race for the long haul, and he needs to just hope that Sanders doesn't have the mathematical pathway to the nomination before this field starts to shrink. And if it's him, Biden, and Sanders, he does fine.
Right, he does fine.
But when you have 5 candidates that all recognize that you have the most momentum, the most money, and are the biggest threat really to them
Right,
getting
and
the
what I know-
nomination, and are attacking you in unison and piling onto one another, working together to attack you, you're in a position
sunk.
you can't win. I
Right.
mean, I thought he should have been better prepared for that debate. He didn't have very coherent or well-refined answers to topics that you knew were going to come
Right, of
up
course.
based on the media attention that they had gotten leading up to the debate. But at the same time, I will say that he, I think, had a better second hour.
Mhm.
I thought he started to recover at the end of the debate, and that it's really a situation where you can't win.
Well, it's just such a tough place to be because there's nobody in that field who's set up to like him.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. We're going to keep discussing this as the primary process goes on. And until next time, we'll see you on the Capitol Conversation. All right, let's play some cards.
Or, a running mate.
So, people are saying Biden's completely out of this, but what if, his campaign has even said, if we can come in second in Nevada, and right now he's tied for third, 3 points at a second, and then win South Carolina, which it looks like he's gonna do, although maybe not by as much as anybody thought.
Well,
Does
that
that
race
sort
is
of
tightening. I mean, the polling averages that I've seen,
Yeah.
I
It's
don't.
just a
23-21
disaster for the
right
poor
now?
guy.
23-21. So let's say Biden holds on in South
Polling
Carolina.
average has it like 24-20. So
Does that launch him back into any sort of relevancy?
I think if he does well in Nevada and then he really cleans up in South Carolina, there's a chance
Right,
that
but
people will see him
I
as a
think the
front runner.
results that we're seeing in the polls that James just read doesn't do much to change the long-term outlook for Biden.
No.
I mean, if he finishes tied for third, which is basically fourth for Biden, I mean, this is a former vice president.
Right.
He gets credit for fourth in that situation as a former vice president, losing to Buttigieg again for the third primary.
Well, in
round.
Nevada, he'd be tied with Steyer.
Tom
Tom
Steyer,
Steyer's in third in both
Well,
Nevada and
Tom
South
Steyer has
Carolina
dumped
right
a lot of money into those 2 states.
Yeah, but it's just a name you never hear, considering
Well,
he's
he
in
wasn't
third
even
right
on the
now.
stage in Nevada.
right.
But yeah, I mean it's a bad look for Biden to lose 3 times to a former mayor of South Bend in the first 3 states of the Democratic primary, and then if he just barely skates by Sanders to a 2 or 3% victory in his firewall state.
Yeah. It's a disaster for him.
I think everyone's going to roll their eyes when he tries to tout that. Like, see, we were down, but we're not dead yet. We won South Carolina
And everyone's like, yeah, you took down your lock, like whatever.
by 2 points.
Right. It's
You had to
no.
sweat it. They didn't call it until 10 o'clock on, whatever.
Yeah, it's a disaster for him as a candidate. What he really needed was a different lineup of primaries and caucuses. The fact that Iowa and New Hampshire were the first 2, he was dead on arrival in a certain sense. If he could really have drummed up support there initially, he might have had a chance. But the fact that the demographics of those states align so poorly for him, and in particular in New Hampshire, the Democrats in that state tend to be fairly left-wing, and it's just killer for a guy who's coming in as the electable moderate.
Well, what
Yeah,
happened? We came on here 2 months ago and sat right here and said, Biden keeps making all these gaffes and messing up, but his polling averages don't seem to dip. And then, he does the same stuff he's been doing for 4 months, and all of a sudden he completely tanks.
He's never been strong in Iowa, right? I think even months and months ago, polling has had him pretty weak in Iowa. And the second he lost Iowa, he was out of the picture.
I think that the mistake that a lot of people make, and I mean myself included, when they evaluate politics, is national polls are overvalued.
Mm-hmm.
And you can suck up a lot of percent in certain states by having broad ranges. Like at that point, he was up by 20% in any state that had any sort of minority population.
Mm-hmm.
So you develop huge leads there, and then the states that are actually contested races, he's actually behind by 5 or 6 points, but you don't see that when you look at a national poll. It's the same thing we look at, all of us here feel pretty confident that Trump's going to win re-election, right?
Yeah.
I would say so.
I would say it's probably 80% certain at this point, which is extremely high percentage.
It is a very high percentage.
But,
we'll have
yeah,
to see how it shakes
If
out.
you look at national polls, he's down by 10 points to almost every Democratic candidate.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because of the skew, New York, California, stuff like that. Trump's not winning any states by the margin that he's going to get beat in California.
No.
But he'll win a ton of states by 10 points.
Yes, and he'll win I think he'll win a lot of states by 1 or 2 points.
Right.
I think the Democrats, if they want to win, need to campaign in Florida. They cannot let Donald Trump win Florida.
Well,
if they
see,
win
Florida's trending right because Andrew DeSantis has just done a fantastic job as
Mhm.
governor there, and he has the highest approval rating of any governor in the country, and is getting like 60% black support in Florida. I mean, it's just
Jeez.
ridiculous. He's doing a fantastic job there, and that helps Trump a ton with winning re-election in Florida. And the fact that even, with all the criticism about the midterms and stuff like that, he swept statewide races in 2018, or the Republican Party did. I think it's a good sign for him in Florida. And then there was just a poll that came out in Wisconsin. He's up 5 points to every Democratic candidate.
Yeah, that's awesome.
If he holds on to Wisconsin and he holds on to Florida, the race is over. He's won. He can drop Michigan and Pennsylvania, which
And
I don't
still
think he
win.
will. And
Well, I
still
think
win.
Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is not looking.
If Bernie's
good
the
for
nominee,
him.
he's not losing Pennsylvania.
So what happens if Buttigieg, Klobuchar, and Steyer, and I guess Tulsi, for whatever that's worth, all get on a conference call with Bloomberg and say, look, this is just kind of how it's going. We're going to drop out and give our support to you, and then it becomes a Sanders-Bloomberg race, which I think could happen leading up to or after Super Tuesday.
It could become a Sanders-Bloomberg race, but that group of people will not endorse him.
No. Tom Steyer wouldn't endorse him, I don't think. I think Tom Steyer tends to fall more on the
Tom
Bernie
Steyer
side
won't
of the field.
endorse anybody when he drops out. I don't know if Buttigieg or Klobuchar will. I mean, we haven't really seen anybody. I mean, Harris hasn't endorsed anybody.
Nope.
Well, Buttigieg and Klobuchar also are, on the debate stage, they were going after each other
They hate each other.
beyond
They
just
hate each other a
politics.
lot.
If one of them were to endorse Bloomberg, I honestly think that might turn the other one off from doing the same.
I
because
don't
they
see
hate each
either.
other.
I don't the field is just so divided, and there's such a despair. We can clump them, but there's something unique policy-wise about each of the candidates that I don't think there's really room for a lot of endorsements. Aside from the Sanders-Warren connection, there isn't a lot of these people are similar, blah blah blah. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to see a candidate that Buttigieg or Klobuchar would endorse. Maybe they would reluctantly endorse Biden if he were still in the race. Reluctantly, though, it would definitely be reluctant.
If you're a Democratic higher up in the DNC and you're trying to actually win this election and not put your weight behind a particular candidate right now, but what you really care about is beating Trump, you have to be terrified. Because I think there's an attitude within the party, this is the sense I've gotten, there's a decent number of people who feel like a vote not for the Democrat is a vote for Trump. But I think there's a lot of people who are my guy or bust, and I think that was a massive problem for them in 2016.
Well, because it's getting so polarized. All you had to do was watch the debate on, Wednesday night? And there was a firestorm. Every single candidate sounded like they hate all the rest of the people on the stage. Bloomberg got the biggest hits, but they were all attacking each other constantly over everything. And it wasn't your standard debate where you're attacking over policy, but you can shake hands afterwards. It was actually fiery stuff, and
Mhm.
Well, and
they
it's
were
taking
insulting
way
each
too
other's
long.
character and stuff. Yeah, exactly.
The higher ups want this wrapped up on before, after Super Tuesday, worst case scenario, and I certainly see a situation in which there's not, there'll be a front runner, but I see a situation in which multiple candidates still think they can get the nomination
Yeah.
after Super Tuesday.
And I think if it
It could
goes to the
easily be
convention,
4 or 5
Yeah.
out of Super Tuesday. the way
contested
that
convention,
Buttigieg-
Trump wins.
The way that
Yeah.
Buttigieg is going, it's hard to imagine him dropping out after Super Tuesday.
If he drops out, he's got nothing, and I think he can manage to rack up the money to stay in it until the end.
And I don't think that he'll do super well on Super Tuesday, or he might be mathematically dead by Super Tuesday, but he'll probably hang on for a little while, a week or two longer after Super Tuesday. So that's him. I think for sure Biden. What else does Biden have in his life except for this presidency?
No,
this run
he's
for
gonna
presidency.
Well, I
So there's
could
no
see-
reason for him to drop out.
Unless he wanted to just say, scorched earth, I don't want the Democrat in
But
the
if
White
you're gonna
House to
drop-
be Bernie.
if
I'm
you're
going to.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is if you're going to drop out, in Biden's position, you have to be dropping out to say vote for this person. I want them to win.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm united
but
behind
other
them
than
so
that,
that we
you're
defeat
right.
Trump. But I think he hates Bloomberg too much to I think that Biden actually dislikes Bloomberg, and their campaigns have Twitter wars constantly with each other. I think that there's actually contempt there,
You have such a problem where
and he won't
People
endorse
on-
Bernie, obviously. So
people on the Bernie Warren side of the aisle actually think that Pete Buttigieg and Michael Bloomberg are closet Republicans, and just want to see, like, they're the same as Trump and kind of right-wing and aren't willing to throw their support behind them if they're the ultimate nominee. And I think you have a lot of people in the country who are on the Pete Buttigieg, Michael Bloomberg trains who aren't necessarily willing to go out and vote for Bernie. They might not vote for Trump, but they're probably not going to vote at all.
Exactly. It'll be a 2016 kind of turnout year, and like that's not going to help. Like a low turnout, Trump wins, and that's
correct.
I mean, Bernie made that point, which, they talk about how crappy Trump is and all that, and the American people hate him, but like they do recognize, like Bernie said, it's going to take a historical turnout to beat this president.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're aware of the support that he has and the campaign juggernaut that he's able to build, and so that is a thing, is that they need to make sure that they nominate a candidate that the party is passionate about. And of the 6 people that were on the stage last night, I don't see one that the candidate, that the whole like ideological mass of the party can get behind and be passionate about. But there's another interesting question you brought up about Bloomberg ideologically, and I think that is a fair question. I mean, I don't know whether he's a closeted Republican or not. I think more to the point, and this gets back to our interview with Hagel, a month or so ago now, about like, I don't think he really is a Democrat ideologically, but
no,
the question is in today's politics, is there really a party for Bloomberg?
No, there's not.
He's too progressive to be a Republican. He's too fiscally conservative to be a Democrat.
Yeah, and he's
and I think that
conservative.
There's an increasing number of people that are starting to be in that same position that Bloomberg and I would say Secretary Hagel is in, ideologically, where they just don't fit into either one of the parties.
I think if Trump wins in 2020, we'll see a realignment of the parties in a way, and that I think the Republicans have already started to shift away from being the party of small government under the Trump administration, because I think all of us agree that Trump doesn't actually want to decrease the size
Trump's
of the government.
not a conservative.
No, he's not. He's a populist. He's a populist who attracts a right-wing base by using tools such as opposing homosexuality, opposing...
the election as a Republican in a very different way that HW and W won the election. So it was sort of a right-wing base, but not really. I mean, he really won the election by getting a lot of people to vote
who wouldn't otherwise.
Had never voted before in their lives and previously said, like,
all politicians are the same, no one works for me.
Right.
I'm disgusted by all
this. The government doesn't care about a person like me, and, they're too elitist, and I'm just this normal guy, like, I don't follow that crap. Like, my uncle is an example. He's one of those people that, like, never voted in his entire life, never followed politics, and now he watches Fox News and loves Trump.
Yep. And I think there's, like you said, a decent number of those people who really care about this president in particular. And I think what you see is that if he wins, if we have another 4 years of him, I mean, just look at that thing we saw where the top 4 runners for the nomination in 2024 for the Republicans. Do you remember?
Yeah, Don Jr.,
Ivanka,
Mike
Pence.
Haley, and Mike Pence.
So 3 of the 4 of those are super closely tied to Trump and get their steam from Trump.
Yeah. Well, and just as many people who love the guy, hate the guy, and many on the Republican side. I mean, don't you think, this wouldn't happen if Bernie was the nominee, but do you see a Bloomberg being able to get some of the never-Trumpers as well as some center-left people and maybe taking the election?
He's the only one out of the 6 on stage in Nevada the other night that I see having a chance to beat Donald Trump. I still think it would be an uphill climb, just if you look at historically incumbents running for re-election, and if you look at various factors, it seems like Trump probably has it, but I think that with a strong campaign, with strong debate performances, he'll have the media behind him. There's a possibility that Bloomberg could defeat Trump, because there are plenty of Republicans that vote for Trump reluctantly because the economy is their number one issue.
Right.
And they would have a safe haven.
Right. They would feel confident that Bloomberg wasn't going to destroy the economy through extreme left-wing politics, and they can feel confident that he's far more presidential, and that he comes off in a way that's not disdainful and doesn't disgust people.
And he used to be a Republican when he was mayor of New York for the beginning of his term, and then he was independent for a little while during his mayorship, and then he eventually became a Democrat after his mayorship ended. So you also have those people with when you're talking about regionalism and all that are like, I've never voted for a Democrat in my life. I will never vote for a Democrat in my life. I don't like this guy, but he's a Republican, so I'll vote for him. Might be able to stomach the vote for somebody that used to be a Republican and really hasn't changed much ideologically from the time that he was a Republican.
I mean, he was a New York Republican, which is a bit of a different breed, but he was in that party.
Right.
And he did kind of embrace this limited government idea.
Yeah. And I think ideologically there's not much difference between him and Giuliani.
Yeah, probably not.
Plenty of Republican, I mean, Giuliani's a New York Republican, but plenty of Republicans think Giuliani's Republican enough.
Yeah.
So. Did you have any other polls?
Yeah, we've got one from California, just because I thought it was.
Well, I mean, that's a huge state.
Yeah, it's a huge state.
Yeah.
And if Sanders were to take California as well as dominate Super Tuesday, I think we could pretty safely wrap it up. And right now, it looks like that might actually happen. He is at 27% as of now. Bloomberg is second with 15. So even though Bloomberg's second, Sanders has a double-digit lead. And then Biden comes in third with 15. Warren and Buttigieg both have 11. Klobuchar is 6, and then Steyer is at the bottom with 3.
The other thing to watch there is, again, what we got into, like, you have two candidates that are right on the viability line, and if Sanders takes 2 more %, one from Bloomberg and one from Biden, he gets all the delegates in California.
And he's a
He wins the nomination.
He really, yeah.
And if you look at Bloomberg's historical polling in California, it goes like this, and then lately he's actually been trending upwards pretty significantly.
Yeah, I don't think that will happen, but it's something to watch for sure. I'll be interested to see a national poll that shows, the impact of the debate on Bloomberg because we can't really get anything from these Nevada, South Carolina polls for Bloomberg himself because, while he did get the biggest beating, he might have had it drowned out by the fact that there was so much chaos
and he's
between
not on
all
the
the
ballot
candidates.
for 2 weeks.
Like,
I mean,
no one.
he's got.
Well, that's not necessarily a positive because it doesn't really keep you in the. I mean, you want to keep having your name talked about and stuff like that. You don't want it to be like where you go into
I
the
think if you're
shadows.
Bloomberg, you didn't have a ton to lose in this debate. I think that's why he got on the stage.
Right.
Because.
But you can't argue with the fact that he's had the most momentum he's had in
Ever,
the past 2
yeah,
weeks.
absolutely.
So to have to wait another 2 weeks before anyone actually casts a vote for you leaves time for your momentum to trickle down.
And he needs to keep it going, which means probably more money. And
ideal for him would have been a vote in place of a debate on Wednesday night.
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, that would have been.
Yeah, he would have been. Yeah, that would
he
be
would have done well, and I think he would have been received.
And that
as
would
a
have propelled him a
front-runner.
lot. And I think he'll do a lot better on the debate stage once the field thins.
Yeah.
Like, he has the money to stay in the race for the long haul, and he needs to just hope that Sanders doesn't have the mathematical pathway to the nomination before this field starts to shrink. And if it's him, Biden, and Sanders, he does fine. on that
Right, he
debate
does
stage.
fine.
But when you have 5 candidates that all recognize that you have the most momentum, the most money, and are the biggest threat really to them
Right,
getting
and
the
wanna help.
nomination, and are attacking you in unison and piling onto one another, working together to attack you, you're in a
You're
position
sunk.
you can't win. I
Right.
mean, I thought he should have been better prepared for that debate. He didn't have very coherent or well-refined answers to topics that you knew were going to come
Right, of
up
course.
based on the media attention that they had gotten leading up to the debate. But at the same time, I will say that he, I think, had a better second hour. I thought he started to recover at the end of the debate, and that it's really a situation where you can't win.
Well, it's just such a tough place to be because there's nobody in that field who's set up to like him.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. We're going to keep discussing this as the primary process goes on. And until next time, we'll see you on the Capitol Conversation.